Hello, uh, everyone, live and future viewers. And I am Steve Wolfson. I am a longtime evolutionary astrologer. And more over the last few years, my talk has been uh, less about the technical details of astrology and more about applying the lessons that we uh, see in our charts and client charts. Um, and my feeling about it is on this channel, there is an astounding and amazing amount of astrological information. And at certain points, it's like I came to, I don't really need more information. I need to learn how to apply the information in my life in ways beyond what I have uh, learned how to do so far. And for the last period of time, I have been particularly becoming aware of this sense of unworthiness. And I didn't used to, I didn't used to look at it as unworthiness. When I was younger, I just felt like there was something, there were things that were wrong with me that I didn't understand, that I wasn't doing correctly, and so forth. In a very deep way, call it self-doubt, self-judgment, self-second-guessing, criticism, and so forth. Um, and what it's become at this point, as I have made what I feel is a lot of improvement in my relationship with myself, especially over the past number of years, recent years. And I come to see that there's an underlying sense of unworthiness that is in many people. A few years back, I became aware of what an emotion called shame, and how it was a physically based emotion, not just an emotional emotion, and it literally affected bodies. And I am now kind of feeling that unworthiness is sort of a catch-all that includes shame. And it's just a general sense of not feeling adequate or enough or worthy, unworthiness. And when you're on the spiritual path, it starts getting really interesting, because you start learning, I am divine, I am a speck of God, I am, I am eternal, I am this divinity, and yet we still feel unworthy. And that's kind of incongruent. How does this go together? So if it's to me, it's just part of the sense of separation that we have collectively created, that I am somehow separate from this whole. And the way I used to feel it was, I'm messing up my part. Now, these feelings of unworthiness and shame, I find, I'm realizing I have spent much of my life pushing away from, because frankly, they have felt terrible. It's a terrible feeling in the body. It's a terrible emotion to be going around and on one level filled with self-doubt, uncertainty about the validity and value of what I'm doing, second guessing myself after the fact. Oh, I would have done this or that. If I was really good, I would have known that. And here I am, but because I'm not, now I see what I could have done, but I didn't do it. So these are I find these are very common, and it manifests in many different ways. I actually have reached the point of feeling that unworthiness, although it may sound strange to say, which I can also relate to insecurity, it can manifest in many different ways. The crazed narcissist who thinks they're better than anyone else around, I won't mention any names, that underneath this, actually, there's a really deep core of a sense of unworthiness and inadequacy. And the very fact of a person that can never take responsibility for what they have done, or that they haven't done anything perfectly, or that they've never done anything wrong, I see more and more clearly is because they cannot bear the feeling that lies beneath this, and they wall themselves off from it. And so they have to act in ways of being better and superior to compensate for the actual feelings which lie deeply buried and projected onto others. Those of us that are more spiritually oriented and empathic by nature, we tend more not to um, push this onto other people, but to take it on myself. You know, this this is where I am. Here's where I am. Here's what I'm not doing right. Here's what I'm doing wrong. Here's what I'm not good enough as. And that is a problem. This is the key part. And that is a problem. I shouldn't be there. I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be like that. That's the key piece right there, which I'm going to get back to. I think I'm going to get back to it right now. The the growing realization for me is, what if feeling uncertain or doubtful or self-critical or judgmental, the feelings, the emotions of this are not wrong or bad or something to get rid of, but an integral, inherent part of our evolving process? Question mark. Let's sit with that for a moment. I'm finding that is very important. What if the issue is not that I feel that way, not that that type of emotion or response arises in me, but rather my relationship to that emotion that's rising within me, where I am taking it at face value rather than seeing it in a context. It's definitely a part of me, a place in me, but what part of me, what place in me is this stemming from? All of this type of what I'll call self-critical or unworthiness stems from our conditioning. We can take it back umpteen lifetimes, and that's true. But the same patterns that occurred umpteen lifetimes ago also occurred in this life. It starts with being born. Most of us, because pretty much most people are pretty self-critical in various ways, to varying degrees. Most of us tend to have parents that manifest in beliefs of what you're supposed to do and who I'm supposed to be that isn't aligned with who I actually am, which therefore is the start of the feeling of I'm doing something wrong or not good enough, which is the essence of starting to feel unworthiness. We're raised with this. Some parents, some family situations obviously are far more critical than others, but I think it pretty much exists uh, nearly universally at this point in time. And we grow up with that sense of not being enough. And lo and behold, we raise children and in that context, because that's who I see, who I am and how I do things and what's right, what good people do and all this. And this gets passed on uh, to the next generation. Um, and on it goes. I'm actually, over the last few weeks when um, race has obviously been very predominant in the United States, and uh, from because of the internet and so forth, not only in the United States but around the world. Uh, I've been going through a lot of changes myself, or not changes, but awarenesses of this stuff that people talk about, like bias and I don't know I don't know the exact terms, but I would call it unconscious racism. Um, Superiority, white superiority, privilege, and so forth. And the fact of the matter is that there are those of us, because of the situations we're born into, we don't sit there going, I want to, my goal is to make one group, for most people, it's not, I want to make one group less than, and I'm going to entitle myself to benefits and privileges that they can't have. I think for the majority of people, it doesn't really work that way. You're kind of born into it. It's the way it is. I I refer to it as they put it in the water, and I mean by that context, like where, and I, in this day and age, I have to be really clear. I am not really a proponent of fluoride in the water. I'm not crazy anti it. I don't support it, but they put it in the water. The intention basically was to do something good, and it has downsides like anything else. So what I mean by using racism as an example, because it's really up right now, it's kind of in the water. You're born and you're exposed to different attitudes uh, about different things, and you don't think about it, you grow up with it. I noticed for myself that I grew up in an area that had a lot of diversity of heritages and races. And I feel very fortunate to have had that background. And at the same time, because there was a lot of exposure to different cultures, there also was a lot of prejudice held by different cultures about other cultures. And, what's been going on in me is, because I like to think of myself as an open-minded person that wants to see more deeply. And as a result of this, because of the time we're in and all that's coming up, I have been connecting with places in myself that are of the conditioned part that I have just been describing, um, that are causing me to relook at a whole lot. It's kind of like um, realizing in a certain way. I thought I was living in a big room, but in certain ways I was living in a smaller box. And all of a sudden, the box is breaking down. The limits of it are being experienced, and I'm finding places in me that I'm not happy about. Now, I can get mad at myself. I can deny them. I and so forth. Or to boil this all down, I begin to see that this is actually part of growth, part of expansion of consciousness, of awareness. There is something going on right now between, as I said in my write up, what feels like 37 planets, sometimes retrograde, um, that is shifting a whole lot in ways that have clearly needed shifting or were not accurate or fair representations of how to structure uh, fairness, equality, support for a very long time. And it's breaking down now before our eyes. This society, culture, our personal awareness, consciousness is changing right before our eyes at a very rapid rate. And of course, anytime that occurs, there's always a backlash of people who are unable to make the shift or don't feel that it's necessary to make the shift or that it's wrong. So I operate from a growing premise that all this stuff about we're all one, we're all emanations of a vast awareness or consciousness are very real and grounded. And that, that doesn't mean that we're going to sit around um, uh, singing kumbaya, all holding hands and loving each other, because there's a lot of very valid frustration and anger and emotion. And all people have reasons why they wound up where they were. And I'm including in that, serious racists. I don't support that stuff. I think it's horrible. But those beings also are divine. That's a fact. There was a Martin Luther King quote that always really touched me, which I didn't understand for a long time, that he was doing what he was doing as much for the black people as for the white racists, because the way they were looking at things was a stain on their soul. And that's profound. To me, that's profound. And that is like a love. And, the corollary to that is he was asked if he hated his enemies, the notorious racists. And he said, I love my enemy, I hate his deeds. I was very, very affected by this, because the gist of it is every single one of us has been through experiences in this life and other lives that are incredibly painful, that have twisted and distorted and hurt the way that we look at things. And much of it is not resolved. And if we're going to resolve, I have to be able to hear another person. Now, just to be really clear about what I'm talking about, if somebody is standing there pointing, an assault weapon at me, I don't think that's the moment that I'm going to hear what they have to say, because I say the person that's showing up and doing that is not even who they are. that's a very traumatized and distorted person. There's not dialogue yet at this point possible there. I don't know what period of time I'm talking about. It could be 50 years, it could be hundreds of years. But I know that it's a process that we're moving towards, because in basically finding nothing less than that works. Somehow, we have to learn to be able to hear and hold space for people, including people with perspectives that I personally might find revolting. We call it love. And also, this is a very good point to say, I am not talking about codependence. I am not talking about denying, repressing, or ignoring one's personal values, sense of purpose and mission, which codependence is kind of trying to meet the other person either in the middle or even taking on their stuff. And that does not work. And that's part of our sense of unworthiness, because part of why we do that is because I can feel like I did something that hurt that person, or I feel sorry for that person, and I want to take on their feeling and in a sense their dharma, because I want to serve and help. And past a certain point, I am denying myself in doing that. I am denying them their lessons. One of the things we don't like to face is that there's an actual, what I would call divine purpose for pain. We humans in general do not like pain, and we would rather be anywhere but here when it comes down to feeling my hurt. Until I reach a point of realizing that it's okay to feel my hurt. This is what I'm beginning to experience with this sense of unworthiness. To my self-confession is my standard MO tended to be, when somebody was pointing out things in me that I didn't want to hear or I thought were wrong, that they were not right. My first place was to, oh yeah, well, look at what you do. You have your own version of that. You're doing the same thing, blah, blah, blah. And then if they really pushed it, then I would get angry. And I got triggered. Triggering is losing myself, my center, and moving into my wound, which means going back essentially to being a little child place that's unresolved from childhood, and getting defensive or denying or attacking. That was my primary strategy. There are many primary strategies for dealing with unworthiness, and it's different people respond to it in different ways. Some people just shrink. They just make themselves really small and feel bad. They're not going to fight back. I don't think any one of these strategies is any better than another one's. You know, uh, Jeffrey talked about it as sadism and masochism, and I'm not. I think maybe there's something in that, but I prefer a different term. It's kind of like not so much. In other words, why does someone treat somebody else in a way that they're getting pleasure out of causing them pain, which I guess we would define as sadism? But what is it in the person that actually creates that situation? What kind of wounding or hurting has that person experienced where they have this need? They obviously are trying to get back at something or someone. And this is the strategy that they have taken on. And they cannot deal with feeling their own sense of inadequacy and unworthiness. And they're going to stay as far away from that as they can get. In the general topic, all of our Western addictions, from workaholism, uh, the typical, the substance ones and so forth, but anything we're addicted to, what we call distraction and all this, really, for the most part, is trying to get away from what I'm feeling because I don't like or can't bear what I'm feeling because it's either so painful or it makes me feel so bad about myself. So there's a very interesting thing occurring inside of me, which is, as I said, I used to have not I can't say used to. I have places inside of me where I can get into a shame place of feeling so bad about myself that it physically, it, I've described it at times like feeling like I'm being slashed with razor blades. Physical pain from the emotions, the just like self disdain, self destruction. And, um, before I started getting a little more aware, emotionally aware, I would just, it was the person that was saying things to me that caused me to feel that way, that I was, you made me feel that way. Um, it's hard to do, but the gradual realization is nobody makes me feel anyway. When somebody is really attacking someone else, they are coming out of their own wounds. It's not like for the majority of people, we're going to find the right words and they're going to have an instant healing and, we're going to be happily ever after. They're deeply in their wounds. We don't live in a culture that says, what are you feeling? And that it's okay to be feeling what you're feeling. Even things, it's okay to be feeling things that our culture tells us are terrible things that only bad people feel, or that stupid people, whatever. The healing, the learning is realizing that anything that is in coming up in me that I can't take, that I don't like, is coming from some wounded place in myself. When somebody is triggering that, that's the typical term used. In other words, I have a wound in a place, and we can, Chiron's good to talk about that because it's a deep wound. When somebody has triggered my deepest Chiron wound, um, it can be this incredible, painful thing. The typical response is to want to shut down. However, one chooses to do that, there's different strategies. Shut down. I'm not going to feel it. I can't feel it. I can't bear feeling it. Um, so I'm going to shut down, or I'm going to strike out, or I'm just, going to disappear, or I'm going to get angry, or I'm just going to leave. Now, I'm not saying any of those strategies or responses are wrong. But what I'm saying is, in the big picture, they have proven to me the only thing wrong with them is in the big picture, they're not effective. They don't change anything. They just repeat the pattern over and over and over. I can choose to stay as far away from the person that has the capacity to touch into my wounds, like sticking your finger in an electric socket, and set that off. And I can go, it's him or it's her, I don't want to be around them. And that's not wrong either. But the fact of the matter is, the wound or the trigger that's being set off is in me. It's not in them. They are finding the place, intentionally or otherwise. They are finding the place in me that is the most effective place to just have me lose it or shut down. So after working with this for quite a while, begin to realize, well, if that wound or hurt place or hole is in me, then there has to be some way that I can bring healing to it. So in the old days, I used to just, not want to do things that brought that up, and carry a belief that someday in some way that I was going to be able to, that what healing it meant to me was I would never have to feel it again. And lately, I've been realizing that the way that I have looked at the type of situations I've just been describing is one way of looking at it. But another way of looking at it, lo and behold, comes out to be that when someone is triggering me in my deepest wound, in one way of looking at it, they're actually giving me an amazing gift. Because the last place I ever want to go is into that wound. And as long as I refuse to go into that wound or deal with it or feel it, then it's never going away. It's not going away. It's not going to heal itself, because all I know how to do with it is repeat the experience I've already been having, sometimes all, lifelong. Where, as I gradually start experiencing or realizing that I am okay the way I am, that I am not intended to be some perfect human being in the way that we tend to think a perfect human being would be, perfectly patient, perfectly this, perfectly that. No, being a human being is messy. This is what I am grasping. It's messy. We have moments and times when it feels really smooth and joyous, and we're around people that we really like, and we're all getting along and all that. And of course, anybody would want more of that and less of the messy stuff. But that's not the way it works. It's just not the way it works. And so what we tend to look at, or I'll speak for myself, what I tend to look at as messy, another way of looking at that is, this is how my quote lessons get delivered. Now, the first level of what I would call incomplete sense of reality and purpose is that when it feels messy, I'm doing something wrong, or Another popular one is, it's my bad karma. I've done this or that. I must have done this or that. I must have been terrible in, however many past lives to deserve this. But see, all that way of thinking does is deepen unworthiness. You see what I'm saying? The more I'm dumping on myself that this is just further proof of how unworthy I am, the more unworthy I feel. And so it builds up, collects over time. And lo and behold, you get to a certain point and it's like, I can't take this anymore. I can't bear it. So what do I need to do? How do I change this? Because maybe the 5 or 10 or 20 or 50 different methods I have used to get there, perhaps I've progressed with it, but I'm still not satisfied with where it is. There's more, there's more, there's more. And I think that's a fabulous place to be, because I think that's where the real turning around, shifting occurs. It starts right there. What do I have to do? My immediate answer to that is I have got to learn how to be nicer to myself, because everything else I have tried has not worked. Now, if you're heavy in an unworthiness kind of mindset, you typically don't have any idea how to be nicer to yourself. In our culture, we tend to look at it as, I'm going to go out. Oh, I'm going to be nicer to myself. I'm going to go get myself a nice meal or buy a new blouse or, uh, you know, something like that. And that's okay. That's not wrong. But that creates a momentary better feeling. It doesn't last. That's the beautiful thing in human life. Nothing lasts. Everything ends. But everything that ends is followed by something new. So what if the reason things end and are followed by stuff that's new is because we actually have learned certain lessons? And if you look at life as everything in my life is like a platform or stage set, scenery set, for me to grasp the lessons that I am here in this form to experience. And our culture teaches us that we're here to have the ideal life is to have whatever I want, whenever I want. And not that many people can have that. And if you ask around of the few that have been able to have more or less that, it hasn't really made them happy in most cases, at least not on a long-term basis. So if all the doing and all the stuff isn't making us happy, then maybe that's not really why we're here. What if I'm here to learn how to appreciate and be okay with everything that occurs, because it's serving a purpose, a point in my unfolding evolution? In our culture in general, we have no idea how to do what I just said, at least consistently. And so what if the new level that I feel is occurring on the planet is to help us see exactly that? It was really interesting because I know I've been feeling, after 3 or 4 months of quarantine, I'm actually, I haven't really wanted to see quarantine end. I mean, to put a footnote on that, to be fair, I am, for some reason, very well set up as far as my income being consistent through this. I'm not suffering from what's occurred. And I know that many people are suffering, and many people are suffering greatly. And in no way am saying that that it's good for them, or they should be, or that they're feeling that they don't want to be there, should be something other than that, because I don't feel that way at all. But it's very interesting, because I read statistics you don't hear about too much, that I was very surprised to read that all in surveys, like almost half the country, United States, felt similarly, that people didn't really want, that many people didn't really want to go back to, quote, normal. And what I say with that is, we have been given the gift of being forced to be with myself. Not all the running around, not all the buying, not all the diversions, not all the distractions, the point of which, in a whole lot of cases, is to keep me from having to feel certain feelings that are in me that I don't like feeling. And I'm saying this is on a collective level. And I think this is the gift that our virus is bringing us. And it's not a gift that many people were consciously looking for. And many people are not happy about having their, quote, freedom impinged at all. And if the way I put it is, if the freedom to distract yourself from looking at or facing what we're actually here for is your definition of freedom, then then I understand the sense of loss that you're feeling. But I don't believe anymore in accidents or bad. That everything that occurs on an individual and collective level is actually serving us, even things that are incredibly painful. Excuse me 1 second. Um, okay. I apologize for that. I feel like to go back to the racial tensions that I was speaking about. So they're up at the same time, and I correlate this very much, actually, to the USA Pluto return. I certainly hadn't expected that that is how it was going to play out, but I had no idea how it was going to play out. So in a way, I'm not surprised. Because as I look at it, we have a country whose foundation uh, almost 250 years ago, was based on a structure of this racial inequality. And it has permeated everything, which I am realizing, even our modern times, even in the hearts of people who don't want this at all, who see things so differently than that. Um, it's permeates everything. So maybe part of this transformation is this breaking down. Now, when you have massive transformation, anybody that's had a major Pluto return in a personal life or on a societal level, Pluto, USA, Pluto return, you know that I've had it, that it does not feel comfortable. It can feel very scary. It can make you want to be anywhere but here. And yet you survive it. I found myself, at the time, I wasn't suicidal, but I was like, if there's any opening here to be taken elsewhere, I'm good with that. And there wasn't an opening, apparently. And 5 years later, I heard myself saying, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm actually glad for all that happened. And then my next thought was, oh my God, what are you saying? But these are the life-changing transformations. They are not easy. They are not supposed to be easy. You are supposed to be feeling emotions that are all over the map: uncertainty, unclarity. So in our culture, we don't have a lot of understanding of that at this point. And this includes the feelings about self, to go back to the unworthiness. Because what if we'll just put on that for a moment. What is the possible motivation, reason, or need to feel that group A of human beings is inherently less worthy than group B of human beings? I mean, why is there this need? Why is there this need? This is covering up, to me, it's covering up emotion. It's covering up feelings inside. What is the reason I need to feel better than somebody else? What am I not looking at? Fortunately, have come to a place where I can recognize that the root of everything is divine, divinity, that we're all equally valuable and worthy expressions of that. I don't live this out 24 hours a day as my normal consciousness, but I've experienced this, and it's something that grows. Clearly, we have a lot of people on this planet at this point in time that have not had that experience, and they're not going to see it that way. And that's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. What if everything that plays out, as wonderful or horrific as it will play out, is just a part of moving forward in that awareness that this life is not at all about what we think it's about, what collectively we think it's about, of status and getting ahead and stepping on others and so forth. This is Western culture for the most part. How are we going to get there? We individually, this is what I'm coming to, is that my coming to terms with my own unworthiness, much to my amazement, is actually an important contribution to the whole planet. Because this is the awareness that needs to come. I actually haven't even gotten into this piece. And the piece of it is what has been happening with me is my worthiness, my sense of worthiness has, I am aligned with enough that I increasingly am capable of allowing myself to feel what used to feel like these horrible feelings of unworthiness. I don't like the way they feel, or I haven't liked the way they feel. I have rejected them flat out. And I am beginning to experience those emotions are okay. They come out of a lot of hurt and pain. I have been unable to hold the hurt and pain that these parts of me have been feeling. They just want to be heard. Everybody just wants to be heard. Um, the young want to be heard. People of color want to be heard. White people have not wanted to hear what people of color have wanted to say, have needed to say, because it brought up the unworthiness in the white people. Because somewhere in there, there's a sense of this isn't right. Why is this person suffering? This is far from the place that is the conscious place, but it's in there. And when someone is pointing out to you and showing you and see all of these unjust things that occur and putting them in your face, you cannot hide from that feeling. And that's what sets people that really have little capacity to be able to own that off into the opposite extreme of pushing back, even violently, against anybody who's even getting them within 5 miles of that feeling. They make, they blame the victim. This dead person did this and that dead person did that, and that proves that they, and it's like, what's that got to do with what happened to them? Nothing. They do this occurs to women, obviously, a lot. Also, because in the soul or psyche of the supremacist, whether they're, a clan person or just, a what I might call an Archie Bunker type, there's wounds and hurt in there. We all have these wounds. We all have this hurt. And so what I'm finding is the first part is making peace with my own wounds, with my own unworthiness. To become okay feeling what comes up. Where I want to go to with it is, that just proves what a bad person I am. See, there it is. And I used to push away from that. I don't need to push away from that. Just because I'm feeling unworthiness or regret is another word, doesn't mean that I'm unworthy and doesn't mean that I did anything wrong. I did, um, um, I did, I just see more and more. That's what I started speaking about. Life is messy. We learn oftentimes what I would call the hard way. Let me call it experientially, because it's not so much that it's hard or not hard. Experientially, I do stuff. I'm doing it innocently. even if it's crazy stuff. What comes to mind is, you know, what if it's a teenager stealing a car, or doing something they really shouldn't be doing? There's a learning that can come from that. Some people can shut down and not learn it and go down that path ever further. But then you hear about people, um, you know, coming out of rehab after 8 times, or coming out of prison after X number of decades, some, not all, and having a real change of heart, understanding something, that uh, there was something going on. And this doesn't mean we shouldn't be hard, be disciplined on people that are, quote, making mistakes. We don't want to coddle them, because that sends completely the wrong message. But we also can understand, this is what people are talking about when they're saying about restructuring the police, where if there's a domestic dispute going on, instead of sending people out with guns, you send out some therapists. This is a sense of caring. It's like people are having problems and we want to help with them. This is our soul nature. This is what we feel. Our society is not structured very much in that direction at this point in time. So my thesis or theory, increasingly, is that underlying all of this that causes that kind of orientation and behavior is this deep sense of unworthiness within people, that structures have been created to keep them from having to feel. And it's because we feel that this unworthiness is wrong or bad or means I'm a terrible person. How much unwanted behavior is actually carried out as a person rebelling against their own sense of unworthiness? They're sick of it, they can't stand it, but they haven't been taught how to deal with it. They don't know. One second. They don't know. They don't know. They don't know how. They don't know how. I can tell you that this process of restructuring all this is going to be messy. The process of restructuring myself is going to be messy. I used to feel that one fine day I would just stop feeling unworthy. More and more I see, I'm not going to, the feelings of unworthiness at certain times are not just going to magically disappear like the virus in April. It doesn't just go away, but my relationship to it can change over time, where I become okay feeling that, okay, well, there are places in me that feel unworthy, that still feel unworthy. But I don't have to be ruled by them. I can have a relationship with them. I can understand that it's a hurt part of myself, and instead of trying to make it go away or correct or fight with that part of myself, I can say, I understand. I understand that's how you're feeling. And I'm sad. I'm sorry that you're feeling that way. And I honor that place that you're feeling. But I can also know that even though that part's feeling has done something wrong, the more adult me can feel I am simply unfolding, and this is part of my unfolding, and it is not wrong. And 7 billion people, we're all dealing with our version of the same thing. So I can keep that in mind before I start getting too down on someone else. I'm getting a question about global economic shifts. And, you know, I can't say that I have a definitive answer on that, how it's going to play out. And I don't even know, I have no idea how it's going to play out. I never expected that a virus was going to turn the country around, for example, or shut the country down, I should say. I had wished, like, when everybody stopped for a while, and lo and behold, it happened. I didn't expect it that way. I will say that from my perspective, the Earth is going through a consciousness uplifting. And despite what it feels like, and despite whatever kind of calamity, tragedy, die-offs, whatever, I don't know. And I'm not saying I think those things are happening, and I'm not saying I don't think those things are happening. I think they're all possible, and I don't think they're all inevitable. I don't know how it's going to play out, but I do know that everything that occurs is to bring us back to ourself and get us into a more loving and inclusive and supporting relationship with all the parts of myself, including the ones that I have rejected. This is the way that I'm talking about this. I think it's the same with shadow, which is parts of self that we deny. Why do we deny them? I don't feel we deny them because we're, stupid people or bad people that just can't admit. I mean, the shadow are the parts that we feel unworthy about. That's what we feel unworthy about. So we don't want to feel unworthy, so we just kind of cut off from it. I think what it comes down to is I'm defining that I'm unworthy because I feel these things like I shouldn't. If I was really a good person, or I was really enlightened, or really a spiritual person, I wouldn't be feeling these things. What if that's not true? I'm saying it's not true. That's the way it looks more and more to me. That we deal with these feelings, they're part of the human experience. And our values have sort of given us a fantasy of what it might be like if I was really doing it right. What if it's not that way? What if the way it is the way it's supposed to be? And the biggest problem is the relationship that each person has with themselves. What if that's the root of economic inequality, racial inequality, the very idea that one person or group should be held down so that another person or group can advance themselves? Why does anybody need to advance themselves at the expense of anyone else? This comes down to inside, and in some way, shape, or form, how they feel about themselves. Because they're missing the bigger picture. So I say everything that is going to happen is going to be leading us in the direction of more or less what I'm talking about. That's my best guess at this point. And how long that's going to take, I don't know. No one knows. But I do know that that's where we're going, because that's who we really are. All the civilizations, all the planets in the universe, all of it, we're all evolving. And to what? higher, deeper, greater self-awareness. And when you look at it as the essence of life, is all created out of a love that is so profound that we can't even, it's so, the light is so bright we can't even look at it because we feel undeserving of it. That's our unworthiness. And yet at the same time that I'm feeling unworthy of it, I am that. We're all that. It's who we are. So we're learning in some way, shape, or form to be able to realize that's who I am, to experience at times, at peaks, that's who I am. And I still have a human part that feels it's unworthy at the same time. And that's okay. That's the amazing part. It's okay. I don't need to change it. I don't need the unworthy part to go away. I just changed my relationship to it. I'm just seeing here. So I'm going to hold it there. If we have any questions, I can answer like one or two questions. I actually have to leave pretty quickly.
There are no further questions from Facebook. Any here from our audience here in Zoom? No, that's it, Steve.
Okay.
Oh, hang on. No questions. Right. Well, thank you so much. Do you want to
You're welcome.
sum up? Final thoughts?
No, I actually have to go.
All right. Well, thank you
I
so
have to be somewhere shortly.
Okay.
So
Thank you so much from all of
thank you all. Thank you, Annie. And thank you everyone that's been listening and participating. Take care.
Would you all please thank Steve Wolfson?
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you. That was wonderful.